Hello there, this is the first video in a series for Dominion 6 to work as a tutorial for people who are new at the game. So in this video we're going to go through setting up your first game, because there's a lot of options when it comes to Dominion 6 and it can feel a bit overwhelming for new players. So I'm going to give you some creation tips to help you out with your first game. So to start a game, what you want to do is hit Create World on the main menu. It then takes you through to the map settings menu. On here, most of the defaults are fine. We're going to leave the map size as is. It sets the number of provinces on the map for each player, which we will decide later on. Alternatively, you can also load a map if you have any maps loaded, but I usually find the random generations are okay for starting off. We're going to start with a standard map, which is a completely random map. You don't know how it's going to look. It's probably going to look something like as it's shown here, with some weird bits of land jutting out into the sea. This is absolutely fine for a starting layout. For the underground layout, we're going to select one cave. I feel like the one cave because it makes it so that everything's going into a sort of underground layer all the same. It makes the underground a little bit more interesting than just having a bunch of caves of random size or a bunch of small caves. It makes it feel much more conjoined. As it comes to map tweaks, you can edit the number of water provinces. Because we're going to probably be playing a land nation, if you're just starting out, what I would suggest is you put the number of water provinces to few. If you're starting as a water nation, obviously either leave it as default or put it as many. We're going to have it as few. We're going to enable rivers, which give blockages to crossing in hot weather, and also improve the income of things. It's a good idea to get used to playing with rivers. Most maps have rivers. So you might as well get used to it just now. We're going to leave on east-west wraparound. Basically, that means that you can start in a province, start putting the camera to either the east or west, and you'll come back to your original spot eventually. We won't have the north-south wraparound. Some maps have both wraparounds, some only have one, some have none. Just kind of depends on what you want. We'll leave the east-west wraparound for just now. Once you're done with these settings, just click OK, and you'll be asked to enter the game name. So we'll probably put this as new player game. Once you've done that, press OK or Enter. As with a lot of things in Dominions, there are key bindings for certain things. If you're ever wondering about that, if you press Shift and then the question mark button, it will come up with the key bindings. There's no key bindings for this page, so we're absolutely fine. What we're on here is we're on the error screen. So there's 3 eras to choose from: the early age, the middle age, or the late age. All 3 of them have different nations. They might have similar names, but they usually have different play styles or slightly different play styles. Every single age plays slightly differently. The early age is a lot of mythological beasts, giants, and lots of powerful mages. Technologically, it's set more in sort of like a bronze age, with some nations using bronze, some of them using stone. Overall, the armor is less effective, as are the weapons. They're usually of lower quality than the other ages. The population on the map for every province is also lower, but the number of gems that you can find per province is usually higher than the other ages as well. This is really a time for magic. There's lots of gems going about which you use for magic, so you'll be able to cast lots of spells. There'll be the really sort of good mages will be kind of controlling the battlefield, controlling the overworld with lots of spells and be able to influence it in certain ways. Middle Age is kind of a mix of the two. It has more population and the units are usually better equipped, more iron style weapons than anything else. Some people are still using older weapons, and some are more advanced than others, but that's the same for most ages. There's also more population per province on average, but there are less gems and less fantastical beasts than the early age. It's more sort of what you would expect a sort of normal fantasy to be. The late ages, so in the late age, technology's advanced quite a lot. Most things are armoured and equipped fairly well. Also, provinces have the highest population of all the ages in the late age. It's mostly surrounded by humans, but there are still occasional giants or other sort of like magical nations around, but they're not quite as powerful or numerous as they were before. The mages do have higher paths in the Middle Age on average, but they're usually more expensive and less numerous for the late age, and also the late age has the least amount of gems of all 3 ages. So magic isn't going to be, it's still going to be a fairly big part, but it's not going to be as big a part as the other ages. certainly a certain type of magic, but we'll go into that later on. So we're going to be going for the middle age, so select whichever age you want. We're going to click the middle age, we're going to click OK. And here you get a list of players that you can choose for. Now for your first few games, or the first game is a new nation, you should probably put the AI behavior to defensive. How do we do that? Is we go for the AI type, we click where it says random, and we cycle to defensive. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Basically what will happen is if you set the AI to defensive, they're less likely to declare war, which can stop you from getting blitzed really early into the game, which isn't fun when you're just trying to learn the game. Don't feel bad as well that for your first few games, just set the AI to easy. You can either left click all the way through to easy, or you can just right click on the AI thing to set it to easy. And what that means is the AI will not be as good as a normal AI. It also won't cheat. It won't get any extra resources or anything like that, so it'll be a little bit easier to deal with. Plus the fact that defensive gives you more time to really get a feel for the nation. If you make any mistakes in the early game, you'll have time to get back up to it, and you shouldn't have any problem figuring out what you want to do. You can also reduce or increase the number of AI you're facing. You can either do that by clicking Add New Player here, or if we look at the key bindings, if you press N, it'll add new player, or backspace will remove the last player. What we can also do, and what we will do for this game, is we're going to hit Shift and L, and that sets every nation to be a land nation. You can deal with water nations as many nations, but for your first few games, it's probably easier just to fight land nations. Especially if you are a land nation. And as well, if you're a water nation, you don't want anybody else really being able to get to you at the early game, set everybody to a land nation, make things much easier. We're now going to press backspace a few times. And we're going to reduce the number of AI nations to 2. This will mean that the map will be a little bit smaller, but this will be much easier for you starting off, being able to understand what's going on, keep track of things without feeling overwhelmed by it. When you get a little bit more used to the game, obviously you can leave it as a default, maybe keep them as easy AI, maybe keep them as defensive. Wait until you get to a point where you feel confident increasing the challenge that you have against you once you understand how the game works a little bit more. Now we've set the 2 AIs to random land nation. We are also currently a random land nation. You can play this way. I wouldn't suggest it for your first few games because you probably want to pick a nation that you like the look of and then stick with it. So if you click on the nation, it gets you to the select nation screen. From here, you can mouse over all the nations and it will give you a small descriptive text underneath. While you're on this page, you can also right-click a nation and it will bring up a nation overview and give you an idea of the strengths and weaknesses of the nation, as well as a little bit of flavor text at the beginning. Once you've had a little look at that, you can click OK. You'll come back to the select nation screen, and that will allow you then select a nation. If you left-click a nation, you'll select it. For this game, we're going to select Ulm. Middle-age Ulm, in my mind, is probably one of the easiest nations to play as a beginner. Anybody who remembers my Dominion Force tutorial remember me saying the same thing. They haven't changed that much since Dominions 4, so for any recurring players as well, this is a good way to get back into the game as well. So if you play Dominions 4, Dominions 5, they haven't really changed very much. They're mostly the same as they've always been. They're a really good starter nation to play. Once you've finished setting up your participants, you can then click OK. One thing I will say is you can also click this tab here to make it a disciple game. What that means is it's then one nation would be a pretender god and other nations would be its disciples. It turns into a team game. I wouldn't suggest that to be one of your first few games. I'd say wait a little bit until you're more used to the mechanics before you try a disciple game. If you want to jump in, that's up to you. When you're ready, click OK. It'll then bring you back over to the overview screen. So here we can see the overview screen of Ulm. Null, that's a Warhammer city, not Ulm. So the good thing about Ulm is it has very strong troop choices, probably one of the strongest roster of troops in the age, potentially in the game as well. Ulm's troops are very, very strong because they have very high protection for base troops. They have higher HP and damage than most human nations. So they're a lot easier to use than some other nations which might have, glass cannons that you really have to kind of script well. With Ulm, you have a big block of heavily armored soldiers that you can just wade in and you can beat your enemies down with that. While you're on this overview screen, it gives you an overview of all your commanders. We'll go into that in the next video. And all your units. If you're ever wondering about your units, you can always right click on them and it'll bring up the unit stat card here, which we'll go into in another video. Another good thing about Ulm for starting off is the fact that their mages are fairly easy to use. They're fairly basic. They don't have very high paths. So you don't get overwhelmed by a reliance on magic to do early game things, but they do complement your troops fairly well with just a little bit of research. Ulm also has a superior magic item forging, which we'll get on into the game, which can help boost your commanders and make them much better. Ulm's priests are also quite weak, but they do have access to inquisitors, which will help you fight off enemy dominion, which we'll get onto in another video as well. I'll be saying that quite a lot. Don't feel bad if you're not understanding anything. Just play along at home and everything should be very fine. So once you've looked at your overview, you've kind of got an idea of what the nation does. Click OK. And we'll come on to the Pretender screen. So this is the screen where you design your Pretender. And it's quite easy to get overwhelmed as a new player. We're going to go over the ins and outs of what everything means for the Pretender screen in another video. So what I would say for now, choose your Pretender, whatever Pretender you want. I'm going to give you a template for just an easy Pretender that you can use at home. So we're going to sit here, I'm going to choose the Earth Serpent here, and I'm just going to click on a bunch of things. You're not really going to understand what's going on, but that's okay. What we'll do is we'll go through this properly in another video. What we can see here is one of the strengths of Ulm. So Ulm can take Drain as part of their national overview. If you ever want to look back at that, just click the View Nation Description and Units. We can see here our research is not affected by drain scale. Again, we'll explain that in a different video. But for now, just copy what I'm doing here. You can add your bless. We'll go over blesses properly in another video. But for now, just do this here. Pause the video here. Copy this Pretender build. This is a great early game Pretender. The Earth Snake's a great chassis for helping you out early on, and it'll really help your early expansion. Once you're done with your Pretender, either if you've copied mine or if you've made your own, click OK. From this point here, you can enter the name of your god. So what people usually do is they just name their stuff funny things, but you can choose whatever you want. We're going to use Earth Snake, which is kind of a community joke. All praise Earth Snake. Excellent. Once you've clicked OK after naming your Pretender, it'll bring you onto the game's setting page. Most of the default settings here are fine, but you can change things as you wish. What we're going to do is we're going to click on the Thrones tab. This Thrones tab here basically sets the victory condition for your game. We're going to leave it as default here. What this means is that we can either win by conquering every single territory or destroying every other Pretender god, or we can win through getting enough Thrones of Ascension. As it stands here, on the map there are currently 3 Ascension points required to win, and there are 3 level 1 thrones. Every throne gives you Ascension points depending on its level. A level 1 throne, once claimed, is worth 1 Ascension point, a level 2 throne is worth 2 points, a level 3 is worth 3 points. Add up all the thrones that you've claimed. If you have the Ascension points required, boom, you've won the game. As it stands, we're going to leave this at the default settings. This should make it so that nobody can just capture all the thrones and just win that way. The AI probably won't do it, and it'll take you a little while to do it as well, probably. Especially if this is your first game, don't feel bad about that. So we're quite happy with the throne options here. As a beginner, do not turn on Cataclysm. If you turn it on, after a certain number of turns, the Cataclysm will begin, and you'll start being assailed by horrors from another dimension. And that's not fun for anybody, so make sure that's ticked off. Coming back to the world settings, we can see the default world settings here. This is all fine for your first game. I would say leave the majority of this here. The two main options I would say is most multiplayer games do play with random events are common. So if you're wanting to get used to multiplayer games, you can set them as common, but it's entirely up to you. You can either leave this as common or rarely. The other thing I would also suggest is if you click renaming allowed doesn't actually do anything for the game, but what it does do is it lets you sit there and go, right, I have the option to rename my commanders if I want, which can be quite fun if they've done something, you know, that's worth some accolades or a specific name to celebrate their achievement. It just lets you have a bit of fun with things. Once you're happy with all of your settings, you want to click the OK button, and then it's going to generate your map. Once your map is ready, this can take a little bit of time just as it generates through all the maps and through all your settings. But once that's done, you'll be greeted with the screen for your first turn of Dominions. From here, you can choose to play the game, or if you would like, you can watch the next video in the series. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope this has helped you set up your first game, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.